Welcome to the second day of the panel discussions in the Dubai Science Park during Arab Health. I'd like to welcome all of you to this event and also welcome the panelists today. Here with me, Ahmad Saleh, Head of Patents and Design with the Al Tamimi Law Firm, and Dr. Kashif Rajput, Program Director for Computer Science at the University of Birmingham. Patents goes hand in hand with innovation, and if we only look at the pharma sector in 2019, they've spent more than $83 billion only on R&D and innovation. So the question is, how can we have that dollar spent here in the UAE? The government of the UAE is taking many bold steps. They are increasing the percentage of spending on R&D from 0.7% of GDP to 2%, which is a huge jump. And they are also launching the 300 billion dirham operation for the output of exports as industry. So industry, as you all know, goes hand in hand with R&D. And I think what we want to look at today is where industry is and how much they're spending on R&D, and where universities are and how they're helping to push that innovation and patents to reach to the market, and what happens in between. So we want to talk about the role of the university and what they do to encourage students, faculty, to have more innovations, to do studies. And also we want to look at it from a legal perspective. How do you protect your own patent? How do you make sure that you come up with something that is patentable and also is protected? Given the local regulations in the UAE and also from a global perspective. Now, Dr. Kashif, I'd like to start with you. And as you know, universities are the powerhouse when it comes to innovation, new ideas, new patents. What are programs that we can do today to encourage more of that?
Hi, hello everyone, and thank you, Brother Marwan, for inviting me to this panel. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I think on your question of what role universities can play in the R&D and the innovation scene, I'll take a step back and I would like to share, I think R&D, the way universities see it, is a whole spectrum going from research and ending in the development. The research, it includes analyzing the problem and developing the solution, which often universities focus on developing it as a proof of concept. And then if it has mileage, if it has patentability, they would go for patents. Those patents often are either licensed to the industry, or the university people would set up spin-outs, and those spin-outs would then be acquired by big players, or if it's a very amazing idea, they would then grow to be big companies themselves. But there is obviously a big transition from a research idea going all the way to a patent, and from a patent going all the way to a product. So that bridge is crossed not only by the academics, but by the academics and enterprises, and in some cases through support from the government as well. So it's the multiple players working together. And if we speak of healthcare industry, then it's academics, it's clinicians, and it's industry who can come and work together in not only developing innovative ideas and innovative solutions, but also taking them through all the way from development of the idea to the product. The universities could obviously work on coming up with novel solutions, and the way universities work is that they are a powerhouse and a factory for ideas. So they can work on as a kind of an inexpensive kind of factory of ideas development and solution development, but they don't have the power to take it all the way for translation into a clinic. And that's where I think the gap lies, and that's where the three players need to work together.
Right, right. Ahmed, if we look at the legal infrastructure, and UAE has obviously done a lot and is still doing more to not only encourage innovation and patents, but also to protect it. Do you think the lawmakers here need to do more of, or are we in par with international standards?
Well, thank you, Dr. Marwan. First of all, it's my pleasure and honor to be here. If I take a step back as well and speak about universities, because obviously we work with a lot of universities. And I think, as you rightly mentioned, professors normally and faculty staff, they love publications and they love to publish their articles, because traditionally this is the way to get recognized in academia through publications of scientific articles, theses, and so on. But I think this is changing pretty much today. Today, when we look at universities, the ranking of universities, more and more the ranking of universities is taking into consideration the number of patents which are issued in the name of the university. More and more patents are taken into consideration as well for the ranking of professors. Universities more and more realize and are focusing on research rather than on education alone. So these institutions are being transformed from education-based institutions, the way they've been traditionally, to more balance it up with more research capabilities and build their reputation as research-based institutions as well, with capabilities in conducting research. So for this, they want to attract, of course, more renowned researchers from across the world. They look for them to come to establish labs, to work in these labs, to develop technologies, to patent them, and as well into building relationships with the industry as well, which are extremely important for collaboration between the industry and between the universities. So the role of patents is for sure playing is very important in the transformation phase of universities into research and into attracting more talents to the university and in building these collaborations with the industry. Because the way the industry looks at things is that the more the university has capabilities in research, the industry would be interested to go and collaborate with the university to develop certain technologies. And we've seen it here in the UAE. For example, in the UAE is, I think, one of the ecosystems where we started to see kind of a pull approach in what the industry needs today, okay? And then they ask, and we've seen these kind of accelerators being built between universities and between the industry, and focusing, for example, on healthcare. And we've seen it in Abu Dhabi. We've seen it between the United Arab Emirates University and Department of Health. Kind of accelerator, putting together people, researchers and professors from the academia, from the university, and putting together as well practitioners in healthcare from hospitals, and trying to come up with, to discuss what are the challenges and come up with possible ideas and solutions. And from there, they start to build it. So really focusing on what is the problem and then trying to find a solution to that specific problem, which is extremely interesting.
It is, yeah. That's a very nice model, actually.
It's
That's
a very nice
good
model because, like this, you are sure that whatever your team is working on in the university will, at the end of the day, have some practical application and a need in the market, which is important. You can monetize. You are sure that you will build, for example, or it will enhance your chances to build a contract with some entities on the ground. You will be able to monetize it quicker and so on. Obviously, the role of intellectual property in all of this is essential, because at the end of the day, you want to protect your rights. At the end of the day, you don't want your invention, after all these efforts, to be taken by others and get wasted, right? So the role of patents here is extremely important. And
Let me stop you here, Ahmed. We're going to come back and discuss because I still want to ask you about UAE and its and where it stands. Dr. Kashif, let's talk about skills in the university, because sometimes you find some universities who have a patent office and they have a long list of patents and it's just sitting there doing nothing. So the students or the faculty have come up with a patent and everything, and everyone is happy. However, it's just sitting in a tech transfer office. So is there an issue of skills, for example, that we need to give to scientists, engineers, biomedical engineers to be able to be more market savvy, or what are the things that you see?
Hi, I think that's a very interesting question, and I would completely agree with you. I think in universities, academics and students are kind of trained to develop ideas and develop novel solutions. Those novel solutions would be, I think they are hard pressed when they're developing those solutions, that these solutions are different from the existing approaches and they are providing superior performance as well. And on the basis of those superior performance and novel solutions, will then they be able to get the patents, for example, or earn intellectual property rights. But that's the training, and the game for the academics finishes there typically. That once you have published or once you have won a patent, your game finishes there and you're on to the next project to earn a new patent and so on. But obviously for the society and for the healthcare industry, that's where the game starts. So someone needs to pick that idea up and take it to an industry grade, an industry scale solution and product so that it can be deployed. So I think there is, the academics are trained for doing academic research, but the enterprise level and the entrepreneurship level activity is lacking mostly. But I think that's where the UAE is playing a very active role. For example, if I speak of my own university, we have been asked by the Ministry of Education at the federal level to embed in our curriculum entrepreneur skills, so that the students right from the very start, when they enter the undergraduate education system and then throughout their years at the university, they're trained for those skills as well. That obviously includes for them to learn marketing skills, but also in skills in how do you identify gaps in society, and how do you identify that your solutions, if you ever develop them, you want to understand whether they have a niche market. You want to understand what's the kind of user base for all of that. But I think the academics also, they can be helped with having some form of a platform with, I think, players like Dubai Science Park working together, bringing academia, clinics or medics, and then industry together, so that any ideas that are developed in the university, they can translate to the deployment stage. It is a big step from patent to product, but that's something I think the university or the academics are not trained for that. And they need to come together to identify what are the steps and who takes the next steps and who would provide the funding, for example.
Because that's really the role of an accelerator, for example, or any sort of a center which comes in between the academia and the industry. So academia, they usually stop at a certain point, and the industry, for them, it's too risky, the product is not ready. So there needs to be something in between that would do, the mentorship, the moving forward, so that it becomes market ready. And that is, I think, the piece in the middle that needs to be created.
Exactly. Within this region, the universities traditionally have been education-focused universities. And as Brother Ahmed mentioned, it is rapidly changing. But I think it requires a lot more funding, particularly in the research programs at PhD level, before the situation changes drastically. So yes, I think the research intensity is picking up, but if I compare that to advanced countries in Europe, UK, North America, I think there's a lot more to be done in terms of bringing research money in the form of research grants, not only for public universities, but also for private universities at the same time, and conduct competitions, hackathon, AI-based hackathons for solving healthcare problems, for example. That would really contribute, I think, to the development of the landscape, innovation landscape in this market.
Great. Now, Ahmed, if I'm a scientist in a university, and I think that I have, the greatest big idea, at what time do I need to, speak to a lawyer and say, hey, I have an idea? And I think a lot of people shy off doing that because they think it's expensive. But if they don't patent their idea and someone else takes it, it's too late. So, what advice would you give to people?
Sure. Normally, universities they have an IP office internally. Okay, IP office, or sometimes it's called IP or technology transfer office, for example, which is looks after the inventions which are issued from the university, from the students, from the faculty, staff, and so on. And they look at it, they assess it, they ask our opinions. Are these really inventions or aren't they inventions? And this is an exercise we need to do at the beginning to determine if this concept is really new and can be eligible for patent protection. They can ask us also, even if this is something patentable, what do you think from the commercial perspective? Does it have commercial prospects? What are the commercial opportunities for this? And we can also provide reports on the commercial potential of these concepts. So from that level, the university decides whether they want to invest into IP, more particularly patent protection of this concept, or whether to ask the students, the faculty, or the lab to work further on this. For example, in some occasions, the concept is not yet ready. It needs to be worked more to distinguish it from what already exists, to get to a level where it's novel, it's inventive, it has nice, good inventive features, and it has some kind of good commercial prospect. So we provide these kind of recommendations to the universities, and they ask their team to, for example, in this instance, to continue working on it, and we provide them with a recommended direction on how to progress it. In some occasions, the concept is novel, and then the university decides to invest into it and to go and protect it through patent protection. So normally the role here in universities for inventions coming out from universities are normally the owners of these. They take the lead in terms of taking these inventions and protecting these inventions. They are the ones who are paying the money, to get these inventions patented. Now, the inventors, the faculty staff, the students who contribute to these normally are mentioned as inventors. And this is something, legally speaking, they need to be mentioned as inventors. As, for example, when they publish articles, they are mentioned as authors. In patents, when they come to invention, they are mentioned as inventors.
Now, I personally have an issue with this. And I've seen this, that some universities would take ownership of a certain patent. And when I ask why do they do that, they say, well, because the patent happened in the university. But I think the question is, what sort of value would they add? At the end of the day, I think the ownership 100% should go back to the inventors, because at the end of the day, a university is only a facilitator. They're not there to be selling patents or licensing out their patents. Their role is, they're an educational institute, right? And I think this is something I've seen very developed, very clear in the West. However, in this part of the world, unfortunately, a lot of universities take sometimes 10%, 20%, sometimes even 50%, just because that idea came from that certain university. And I think this is maybe a change in mindset that we need to advocate for, and make sure that give it to the inventors, because it's their idea at the end of the day.
Okay, I will maybe shed a little bit of light on the mindset of the universities and what's behind this logic. Okay, if you look under the law, the law gives ownership of an invention. If we look at an employee-employer relationship, Okay, if someone is working in a company, okay, as employee, and that employee is working in research, and is expected, according to his contract, his head of research, for example, to come up with inventions. Okay, it's part of his duty. So the company is providing all the resources to do that. You know, computers, resources, whatever. Okay. So in this case, under the UAE law, any invention which comes to birth by this employee belongs to the employer, to the company. Okay, why? Because he is receiving salary, and he's being paid for that, and it is within his core duties to conduct research and come to inventions. Okay. Now, the other scenario is that an employee is working in a company, okay, however, it's not within his or her duties to do research and come to inventions. However, they came up, to an invention, for example, without using the resources of the company. And the invention is not related to the business of the company. Let's say the company is doing AI in healthcare, for example, and that employee is not an engineer, is not in research, okay, and came up with, a concept, for example, how to help better client customer service, let's say. So it's not related to the business, and it's not within his duties to come, and he didn't use the company's main resources for that. Okay. So in this case, the law gives him ownership of the invention.
Fully?
Okay. Employee.
Fully?
Fully.
Okay.
Now, the third scenario, which is gray area in between, okay, is that the employee is not expected to invent according to his employment duties. However, he came up to an invention, okay, which relate to the business of the employer. Okay, and he has used some resources of the company. Okay, so in this case,
which is probably most of the cases.
Many cases, it's a gray area. So in this case, according to the federal law, okay, according to the federal law, he needs to disclose this invention to the employer, and if the employer notifies the employee that he's interested in acquiring this invention, the invention will go to the employer. However, the employer needs to pay fair compensation to the employee. Okay, sometimes it's in terms of some employers come and pay, for example, a couple of months of bonuses or whatever. If they don't come to an agreement between them, then they need to go to the court, and the court will decide what is the fair compensation.
This law is limiting people to be more transparent and be more encouraged to, come up with innovations.
Okay, if we look, for example, in more open, if we look at some other countries, for example, in some countries, the inventions, you have similar laws. This is for the first and third scenario. The second scenario is the one which is you normally don't find it a lot in many countries. Right. Okay, but now the way it works in practice is that when an employee joins a company, he will sign in the employment contract an assignment. So whatever intellectual property he'll come up with, it's assigned automatically to the company. This kind of assignment in the United States is completely legal. Okay, now in the United Arab Emirates, okay, even if the employee signs such an agreement, okay, for the scenario where he comes to his invention alone and it's not related to the business, still there is it's problematic with respect to the agreement, because this is kind of, the law wants to protect the employees in a certain way. So even if they give up their rights in advance, they're not allowed to do so as per the law, and sometimes they consider the contract void. And then, so there's kind of protection for the employee in this respect. If we bring it to the university context, okay, many today researchers are employees of universities. So universities are entities at the end of the day, and many researchers are employees. So in this case, they are in the university, they are using the resources of the universities, they are being paid by the university.
What if you're a student?
If you are a student, then it's when this is in the IP policy. Universities should have an IP policy in place. And
Because
in
sometimes it's the faculty and the student together, right?
sometimes the faculty and the students, but in most cases the universities have IP policies saying that any inventions which students come up with belongs to the university. However, many universities gives incentive, meaning ownership is for the university. However, inventors have a certain percentage on the royalties when the invention is being commercialized.
Yeah.
Okay, and even universities give, many universities give these students and faculty staff the opportunity to go and build startups. So we've seen a lot inside the country and the region, a lot of innovation and science parks being established in connection with universities. For example, Science and Innovation Park of UAEU, Khalifa Innovation Center of Khalifa University.
Yeah.
We've seen Sharjah Technology and Innovation Research and Innovation Park as well, in connection with American University of Sharjah. So you have these parks. So they are providing or enabling or establishing facilities for them to go and commercialize these inventions, and then they will support them and they will have agreements with them in this respect. But ownership in itself, it's not of the inventions. For inventions which come out from universities, are kept within the university. Okay. Now, if you look at universities collaborating together, sometimes you have a researcher coming from another university, a foreign university. Okay, for example, a university in China or in Canada coming to work in a university in the UAE. So there is no employee-employment relationship here. Okay, so in many occasions, when an inventions come to birth from the joint efforts of researchers coming from different universities, the ownership is also joint between the two different universities. Okay, and here at the outset, normally an agreement is put in place between the two universities to agree on whatever IP is created during this collaboration and how it should be, who should own it, who should commercialize it, what is the share of each one, and so on. This is what we name is the research collaboration agreement. We really state all the different provisions and agreements between the two universities as for the IP protection, ownership, commercialization, improvements, if later on improvements on this invention comes out, and so on. Excellent.
I know it can be very complicated and we don't want to go in more details. Dr. Kashif, Birmingham University, obviously the UK, is one of the leading universities and even globally, and does a lot of research. So are there any lessons learned that we can learn from Birmingham University in the UK? And the UAE and UK also has an excellent relationship and a lot of history coming about medical research and treatment. A lot of patients go and they're treated there, and the people are very familiar with the NHS system. So what do you think, what are some lessons learned that can be implemented here in Dubai or UAE?
And I think I'll answer it in two parts. One, in general, on innovation itself, innovation of any sector, any product. And second, for healthcare or kind of medical related as well. I think the first question is, what can we learn within UAE, for example, to set the scene for an innovative economy? That would be obviously empowering the universities to be able to win research grants, for example, competitive research grants, because these competitive research grants then provide resources in the form of PhD students, but also in the form of lab equipment that can then work on the development of innovative ideas and develop the solutions. And that works across the board. I mean, the technically advanced countries, they all do the same in all of the research intensive universities. You spend more on research, but you then recoup that money back by the production of patents and the licensing of patents and the establishment of spin-out companies. When it comes to healthcare-related innovation, so our campus in Birmingham is right next to the University Hospital, Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, which is the second biggest hospital in the UK. And it was a 5-minute walk for me to move from my School of Computer Science to the hospital and meet some of the colleagues from either hospital or the medical school. But that allows me obviously to conveniently communicate with them, being within the same institute, same campus, and discuss and exchange ideas on solving some of the problems which require both the clinical or medical input and technical input, either from engineers or computer scientists. So I think working together across disciplines is really crucial.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the major hospitals like Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, and the likes have a very, very active tech transfer office embedded in the hospital, so that the university works with that tech transfer office, and then they take it through all the ethics committees, safety, etc., and then they're tested, whether it's clinical trials or not, on the patient. So creating that dialogue is very important. Now, Ahmed, let's talk about numbers a little bit. I mentioned $83 billion in 2019, and you've worked with a lot of the large companies. How can we have some of that dollar money spent here?
I think we're on the right way for that. Okay, if you remember, Dr. Marwan, and we've been doing panels together for years, and this question was always coming. So I think that.
But I've seen it different already. I mean, for example, maybe we don't realize this, but with COVID, for example, a lot of the vaccines that people have taken were at clinical trials, and so there was a rapid adoption of guidelines and laws to accept clinical trials and to have them administrated in a very safe way.
Absolutely, and this has been justified under emergency situations. But how do we get the money inside the country to be spent in research and development? I think how to build this innovation ecosystem, and I think this is not the $1 million question, but the
$2 billion.
$2 billion question, if not more. And I think we're in the right way. And just to remind that we need four key components to have an R&D and innovation ecosystem. We need research centers, including universities, to be active. Okay. And we need the entrepreneurial ecosystem to be there. It means startups and entrepreneurs. We need funding, including venture capital firms and any funding coming from the governments. And four, we need the government sector extremely present in this and playing an active role, including in the funding, including in the regulatory, including in the legislative to enhance. And these four together will be able to run the ecosystem. Okay, now the magic recipe, so we have the recipe, but what to put first? Because normally, if you want...
Is it the flour, the egg, the what?
Exactly, so the chicken and the egg. And this is, I think, here the complexity. If you take for example, MIT ecosystem, you go to MIT ecosystem, to Cambridge, you have your labs inside the university. Outside, you have entrepreneurs all over, even coffee shops where entrepreneurs meet with venture capital firms and so on. Venture capital firms across the road, all in one place. Okay, and all of this ecosystem works with wonder, and you really, when you look at it, and it's amazing, how it works. So, and this is what we need here. Now, so far, investment or funding has been difficult inside, or more rare inside the country. Okay, and I think if you ask entrepreneurs what do they need, they tell you funding. If you ask universities what do you need to conduct more research, they will tell you funding. If you ask then universities what do you need to commercialize, they tell you entrepreneurs.
Correct.
You tell entrepreneurs what do you need to come in.
Yes.
So, and you ask venture capital firms, why are you not coming inside the country? Why do someone, if an entrepreneur or startup has an interesting technology, has to go to Silicon Valley to get funding? They tell you there aren't enough innovations coming out from the country for us to come and establish. This is the traditionally, what have been said traditionally. But today, the things are moving is a bit different. We see more venture capital firms coming inside the country, Okay, there is more presence in that. Okay, we see also the government is in being involved more to encourage research. We see, and for example, Research and Development Authority in Abu Dhabi being established. Okay, and this established many labs. Okay, material labs and many labs under this authority to conduct research and to commercialize the innovations and to establish collaborations with universities. So we are seeing much more activities going in this cycle, okay, to try to turn things out. And what we need at the end of the day, it takes a little bit of time because you need at the end of the day the funding you're injecting, and you want this cycle to turn to start generating revenues. When it starts generating revenues,
And it goes back.
it goes back. Everyone is happy.
Correct.
No?
Yeah, of course. I know. It's something that definitely takes time, and I'm very hopeful of what's happening. We've seen very, very good signs. Definitely very good steps. We met formally with the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Science, and they're driving the agenda when it comes to R&D and commercialization. So I think we will see much more coming in the coming few years, and it's very important, I think, for the UAE not to copy paste an approach from UK or the US. It should do something that will work for the UAE, because we have some unique aspects, unique issues, unique good things and bad things, a lot of advantages that we can take advantage of, and I think I definitely see the light at the end of the tunnel. Great. If no further questions, I'll ask, maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Kashif, if you have any closing remarks.
Would like to touch upon something that Brother Ahmed was referring earlier in terms of the ecosystem overall. I think, excellent signs within the UAE system, and with fantastic examples that have kind of churned out in the form of Cream and Soup.com, for example. They obviously were invested by some of the local players. The innovation has resulted into products, and the product has resulted into revenue. And that revenue is also now being reinvested within the ecosystem. And obviously these two are the mega success stories, but there are many other success stories. So within the, I think, Dubai and UAE landscape, the UAE National AI Strategy, the UAE Fourth Industrial Revolution Strategy, the Dubai Industrial Strategy coming up, I think all of these are moving towards the creation of an innovation-driven, a competitive, and a creative economy, which is great to see. And at the same time, I see great investment going to the education sector by Dubai and UAE as well. UAE and Dubai in particular has become a travel and a business hub over the last 20 to 30 years. Yeah. It's already on its way to become an education hub for not only this region. To some extent, it's already an education hub for this region, students coming from Indian subcontinent, Middle East, Malaysia, China. But I think it has potential, and it's moving towards making this place a global education hub as well, with Dubai being the city boasting largest number of international university campuses for universities like us. At the moment, I think the focus is on education, but it has to be that there will be more investment, and there are signs of that investment coming in for research. And that's when I think the pendulum will trip over to creation of more ideas and more patents and more innovation. So excellent signs there.
There are so many things we can talk about in the closing remarks, but I'll choose to talk about perhaps the importance of intellectual property. Yeah. So it's very important for everyone who's involved in innovation and the development of new concepts, new innovative concepts, to be very conscious about intellectual property. And if there's one takeaway from all of this, is do not disclose your concepts, your inventions publicly before you consider protecting your concept through a patent or other IP right, depending on the nature. Because if you go out there and even if you speak to friends about your invention, or you publish it in an article, or you do whatever kind of, or you put it in a prototype, for example, which is it's publicly available for people to see it. This is considered to be public disclosure of your invention. So your invention will no longer be considered to be an invention because you killed the novelty. It's no longer novel. Okay. So you need to be very careful about that. Don't disclose your invention before you consider to register or to file a patent application. And you can, and there are ways to do this cost efficiently, not that expensive. Don't be afraid. You can file a provisional patent application to temporarily preserve your rights until you consider how to expand more on it, to protect it more fully. So there are some ways we can arrange for this in a very cost efficient way. Couple of thousands of dollars, this is what it needs to be.
With the exception with your wife. Can she know?
We can file, for example, in the US a provisional, and then we will have 1 year, and within 1 year we'll need them to file a regular application in the countries here, in the region or outside, depending where the market is. But your comment with respect to the GCC patent office, right?
No, I was just joking. I said, with the exception of your wife, she can know.
Well, actually, you need to sign an agreement with her. If she can know according to the law something, but sign an agreement. Have her having a confidentiality clause with your wife.
It depends if he works at a competitor organization or not.
True. Ahmed and Dr. Kashif, thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you for the audience for attending.
Thank you very much.